Top 20 Strangest Toys from the 1970s. That bone-chilling laugh you're hearing right now? That's not from some forgotten horror movie. It's from a real toy that sat in thousands of kids' bedrooms during the 1970s, a time when toy makers seemed to have only one rule: there were no rules. What if I told you parents actually paid good money for toys that could transform kids into serial killers, dolls that did things that would get them banned instantly today, and playsets that, well, let's just say the word toxic was more of a feature than a warning? In this video, we're talking about more than 20 of the strangest toys ever made, each one weirder than the last. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why some of these are now worth thousands of dollars, while others are locked away in boxes labeled "Never Again."
So this is Hugo, huh? He kinda looks like an adult baby.
Let's start with Hugo, Man of a Thousand Faces. Released by Kenner Toys, this wasn't your average doll. It was basically a crash course in disguise making for kids. A bald plastic head that came with wigs, fake scars, putty, and even facial hair. The idea? Transform Hugo into anyone you wanted. But here's where it gets weird. While Kenner probably imagined kids creating fun characters, what they got instead were thousands of children turning Hugo into the creepiest faces possible.
What makes Hugo especially great is you can dress him up in all these thousands of different disguises, so
kids would spend hours making Hugo look like their worst nightmares, mixing scars, weird mustaches, and that dead-eyed stare that never changed. Some parents actually reported finding their kids' Hugo dolls hidden in closets because they scared themselves with their own creations. Meet Baby Laugh-A-Lot, possibly the most misnamed toy in history. Renko thought they were making a cute laughing doll. What they created instead was pure nightmare fuel. When the batteries were fresh, the laugh was already unsettling. But when those batteries started dying, that's when the real horror show began. The laugh would slow down, get deeper, and somehow echo through the house at 3 a.m. And if Baby Laugh-A-Lot wasn't enough to haunt your dreams, her partner in crime was the Jolly Chimp. There was nothing jolly about this cymbal-clashing monkey. With its dead eyes and mechanical movements, it looked like something straight out of a horror movie. And guess what? It actually inspired several. Those glowing red eyes and that endless clashing sound. Some kids swear their Jolly Chimps would start playing by themselves in the middle of the night. But we're not done with the creepy yet. Let's talk about something that was actually meant to be played with in the dark.
What are you looking to get for it?
I'm asking $800 for it.
Ventriloquist dolls. These weren't just any dolls. They were special cloth dolls with movable mouths and blank stares that seemed to follow you around the room. Parents thought they were educational. Kids knew better.
Daddy! Dad!
My boys.
There's a reason so many were found stuffed in attics years later, usually facing the wall. And speaking of things found in attics, the Skinny Bones family might take the crown. Imagine someone looked at a stick figure drawing and thought, yes, let's make this into a toy line. These were literally skeletal thin dolls with joints that clicked and clacked when you moved them. They were marketed as a fun family of toys, but they looked more like something you'd find in a tiny haunted house.
And if you think these were creepy, just wait until you see what kids were actually supposed to put in their mouths.
Super elastic bubble plastic. That's right, plastic bubbles from a tube. Just squeeze it out and blow it up.
Super elastic bubble plastic was exactly what it sounds like. Plastic you could blow up into bubbles. But here's the catch. Each bubble came with a free dose of toxic fumes. Kids would squeeze out this weird goop, put it on a straw, and blow. The chemical smell was so strong it could clear a room. But back then, that was just part of the fun. Parents actually thought the stronger the smell, the better the bubbles. Spoiler alert, those weren't magic fumes they were breathing in.
She drinks the water when we pump her tail.
Now, let's talk about Milky the Marvelous Milking Cow. A toy that somehow made it past multiple meetings without anyone questioning its existence. A plastic cow with rubber udders that kids were supposed to fill with water and, well, milk. The marketing team called it educational. Parents called it questionable. The real problem? The water would sit in the rubber udders for days, creating what one mom called a science experiment nobody asked for. And don't even get me started on the cleanup process.
Meet new growing up Skipper. She's 2 dolls in one. Because when you turn her arm, you can make her change instantly from a little girl to a tall, slender teenage doll.
Skipper doll. Skipper, introduced in 1964, was Barbie's first ever family member.
Barbie, Ken, Midge, and Alan. But you haven't met Skipper. She's Barbie's little sister.
She was created in response to criticism that Barbie looked too mature. Instead of giving Barbie her own child, Mattel cleverly gave her a younger sister to babysit. Skipper came with either blonde, brown, or dark brown hair, wearing a cute red swimsuit and matching shoes. In 1975, there was the famous Growing Up Skipper doll that could change from a little girl to a teenager by turning her arm.
Growing up Skipper? May I? Okay. Watch this. Ah! Her boobs grow.
Her height would increase, and she'd develop other changes that had parents rushing to return her to the store. What made this even more bizarre was the marketing. "Now she's growing up just like you," the commercials cheerfully announced, as if watching a doll go through puberty in seconds was totally normal. The mechanism made a clicking sound that haunts former owners to this day. And if you turned her arm back, instant time travel back to childhood. If only real puberty came with a reverse switch.
The Shogun Warrior Collection, each sold separately, made with...
Moving on to something equally dangerous but way cooler. Shogun Warriors. These massive robot toys stood almost 2 feet tall and came with an arsenal of spring-loaded weapons. The selling point? They could shoot their fists, missiles, and basically any other part across the room. Kids loved them. Emergency room doctors? Not so much. One model could launch its plastic missiles with enough force to dent walls. The best part? The instruction manual actually suggested aiming for your friends.
Now you can play world's greatest investigator with JJ Arms.
But if you think launching plastic missiles was intense, meet JJ Arms. Possibly the most surprisingly real toy of the decade. This action figure was based on a real-life private detective who lost both hands in an accident and replaced them with prosthetics. The toy version came with interchangeable hook hands and, get this, a knife hand. That's right, they made an action figure for kids with an actual knife attachment. The 70s were a different time, folks.
Big Jim Sports Camper.
And then there was Big Jim's WOLFPACK. Action figures that took play fighting to a whole new level. These weren't your average toy soldiers. Each figure came with realistic weapons and what the box called karate chop action. But the real kicker? The outfits. These tough guys came dressed in what can only be described as combat-ready beachwear. Somehow they managed to make action figures that were both dangerous and questionably dressed. While modern toys go through months of safety testing, these gems operated on what seemed to be a let's see what happens policy. The really wild part? Some of them were bestsellers.
PULSAR, the ultimate man of adventure.
Let's blast off into the weird world of sci-fi toys with PULSAR, the action figure that took what's inside counts way too literally. This 13-inch tall ultimate man of adventure came with a transparent chest panel that opened up to reveal glowing organs. Yes, you heard that right, glowing organs. Kids could actually remove and play with PULSAR's heart, lungs, and other squishy bits. Parents thought they were buying an educational toy. What they got was their kids performing plastic surgery on the living room floor. But PULSAR wasn't done being weird. He had an arch nemesis named HYPNOS, who came with his own twist on the anatomical action figure trend. While PULSAR showed off his internal organs, HYPNOS featured a mind control wheel in his head. Turn the wheel and his face would change expressions. It was supposed to show mind control in action. But mostly it just looked like HYPNOS was having a really confusing day. Together, they created what might be the strangest hero-villain dynamic in toy history. One guy showing off his guts while the other had a mood ring for a brain. Jaws. Just when you thought it was safe to go back to the toy store, the Jaws board game swam onto shelves. Imagine Operation, but instead of removing funny bones and rubber bands, you're trying to fish questionable items out of a shark's mouth. The game came with a plastic shark whose jaw would snap shut at random intervals, usually right when you were elbow deep in plastic fish parts. The marketing claimed it was fun for the whole family, though most families probably didn't expect their game nights to include minor finger injuries.
Oh, Daisy, what am I gonna do with you?
Lazy Daisy doll, released by Ideal in 1971 at a price point of $5.99, which, believe it or not, was quite the investment for a doll that basically had narcolepsy. This peculiar plaything had one very unique feature. The moment you set her down anywhere, she would instantly pass out into what appeared to be a deep sleep. No batteries required, which actually makes it even creepier when you think about it. Parents reported finding these dolls face down in the most random places, giving quite a few unsuspecting family members a shock. Today, collectors actually seek out these narcoleptic nurture toys, with mint condition models fetching upwards of $100. I guess there's something charming about a doll that perfectly captures how we all feel on Monday mornings. Star Team Toys. Released by Ideal. In 1978, these action figures were such an obvious attempt to cash in on Star Wars' success that George Lucas himself took notice, and not in a good way. The lawsuit that followed might be even more entertaining than the toys themselves. Take the Knight of Darkness figure, who looked less like a menacing space villain and more like he'd gotten lost on his way to a disco-themed costume party. Despite Lucas's legal action, the court ruled in Ideal's favor, noting that STAR actually stood for Space Travel and Reconnaissance. While they did manage to get their own Marvel comic book series, these toys now serve as a delightful reminder of how the 70s interpreted space adventure. Collectors particularly value the Knight of Darkness figure, though mostly for its unintentional comedy value. Hasbro's Great Moves game, 1978, was clearly designed to capitalize on Twister's success, but with an artistic twist that nobody asked for. Players would strap a pen to various body parts and attempt to draw pictures while their partner wore a small whiteboard. The results were often more abstract than intended, and depending on where the pen ended up, some drawings might have made Jackson Pollock blush. The game's short market life might have had something to do with parents' reluctance to combine permanent markers with uncontrolled body movements. Mattel's creepy crawlers, the stuff of childhood dreams. I remember tearing open the box on Christmas morning, the smell of fresh plastic filling the air. The metal molds gleamed with possibility, just waiting to create the most grotesque, awesome bugs imaginable. I'd spend hours hunched over the machine, watching with wide eyes as the goop transformed into spindly legs and bulbous bodies. The sizzle and pop as they cooked was like mad science music to my ears. Sure, I accidentally branded myself with the Creepy Crawlers logo a few times, but it was a small price to pay. My room became a haven for neon critters, until Mom found out and made me keep them in the garage. Still, those oozy, gooey creations will always hold a special, slightly sticky place in my heart. The Sunshine Family dolls were Mattel's answer to parents concerned about Barbie's materialistic lifestyle. Steve, Steefy, and Baby Sweets were the anti-Barbies, complete with their own craft store and a decidedly more modest wardrobe. These ethically conscious dolls wore simple clothes, made their own furniture, and probably would have been into organic farming if that had been a thing in the 70s. Their accessories included craft-making tools and a delivery van that looked more like it belonged at a folk festival than a fashion show. Modern collectors appreciate them as a counterculture alternative to the mainstream fashion dolls of the era. The Inchworm, man. That thing was my trusty sidekick. I remember the day my grandpa brought it over, fresh from the toy store. It was love at first scoot. I'd sit for hours, mesmerized by the way it would wind itself up an inch along, clicking and clacking with each movement. The bright colors and friendly face made it seem almost alive, you know? I took that thing everywhere, to the park, to school, even tried to sneak it into church once. Mom was not amused. It became a part of so many adventures. I'm pretty sure I even made it a little inchworm-sized superhero cape at some point. Thinking back, it's amazing how something so simple could spark such joy and endless imaginative play. I wonder whatever happened to my old pal. Maybe it's still out there somewhere, bringing a smile to some other kid's face. Let's talk about that creepy Hasbro doll, the one they called Disturbing Homeless doll. I never actually owned one myself, but I vividly remember seeing the commercials as a kid and being equal parts fascinated and freaked out. There was just something about the way it looked, with its tattered clothes and vacant stare, that unsettled me to my core. I mean, who thought it was a good idea to make a toy out of society's most vulnerable people? I get that they were probably trying to teach us kids about empathy and compassion, but man, did they miss the mark? It felt more like a mockery than a learning tool. I remember my friend's little sister had one, and whenever I'd go over to their house, I'd give that doll a wide berth. It always seemed to be watching me from the corner of the room, judging me with those hollow eyes. One time, we dared each other to take turns holding it for as long as we could. I lasted about 30 seconds before I chucked it across the room, my heart pounding in my chest. Needless to say, I didn't win that particular challenge. Looking back, it's hard to believe that something like the Disturbing Homeless doll ever made it to toy store shelves. I guess it was a different time, but still. What were they thinking?
Oh, Sunday, it's me!
Sorry, Ronald.
Especially when you got delicious McDonald's hamburgers. Ronald, you can't be on TV.
On a slightly less unsettling note, let's move on to the Ronald McDonald doll. Now, I know clowns are supposed to be fun and friendly, but there was always something a bit off about old Ronald. Maybe it was the permanence of his smile, the way his eyes seemed to follow you around the room. Or maybe it was just the fact that he represented a giant fast food corporation hell-bent on selling burgers to kids. Either way, I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with the Ronald McDonald doll. I remember my grandma had one that she kept in the guest room where I'd sleep when I stayed over. She thought it was cute, a little piece of Americana to welcome me. But for me, it was a source of endless nightmares. I swear, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see that doll sitting at the foot of my bed, grinning at me in the moonlight. I'd pull the covers over my head and try to convince myself it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew the truth. Ronald was watching, always watching. Despite my childhood fears, I have to admit that the Ronald McDonald doll did hold a certain charm. It was a simpler time when a trip to McDonald's was the ultimate treat and the thought of a burger and fries could make your whole week. I remember saving up my allowance to buy a Happy Meal, just so I could get my hands on the latest McDonald's toy. And if that toy happened to be a miniature Ronald, well, I guess I could overlook my unease for the sake of my collection. The Vertibird. Now that was a toy that really captured my imagination as a kid. I mean, it was a helicopter and a car all in one. How cool is that? I remember seeing the commercial for the first time and just being in awe. The way it would take off from the ground, blades whirring, and then seamlessly transition into driving mode. It was like something out of a spy movie. I begged my parents for one for months, dropping not-so-subtle hints at every opportunity. And on my birthday, there it was. That glorious green and yellow box, just waiting to be ripped open. I couldn't get it out of the package fast enough. The smell of new plastic, the weight of it in my hands. I was in heaven. I spent hours zooming that thing around the house, making engine noises and pretending I was on top-secret missions. The Vertibird could conquer any terrain. Hardwood floors, carpets, even the treacherous landscape of my mom's garden, much to her chagrin. It was my trusty sidekick, ready for any adventure my young mind could dream up. Of course, like most toys of that era, the Vertibird wasn't exactly built to last. After a few months of intense play, the stickers started peeling off, the blades got bent out of shape, and the battery compartment refused to stay closed. But even in its dilapidated state, I loved that thing fiercely. It wasn't just a toy to me. It was a symbol of countless hours of imaginative play, a key to unlock new worlds and possibilities. Moving on to Suckerman. Oh boy, where do I even begin with this one? If you grew up in the 70s, chances are you had at least one of these strange, stretchy creatures in your toy box. They came in all sorts of garish colors: neon green, highlighter yellow, electric blue, and had these weird suction cup hands and feet that would stick to just about anything. The commercials made Suckerman look like the most amazing thing ever. You could fling it at the wall and watch it slowly creep its way down, or stretch it out to impossible lengths and let it snap back into shape. It was marketed as this wacky, wild toy that would provide hours of entertainment. And for a little while, it did. I remember having Suckerman slap fights with my friends, seeing who could make theirs stick to the weirdest places. The TV screen, the dog's back, my little sister's forehead. Sorry, sis. We'd have contests to see who could stretch their Suckerman the longest without breaking it, or who could make the most satisfying thwack sound when flinging it at the wall. Pogo sticks. Man, those things were the great equalizers of the neighborhood. It didn't matter if you were the fastest runner or the best at sports. If you could master the pogo stick, you were the coolest kid on the block. I remember getting my first one for Christmas, tearing off the wrapping paper to reveal that shiny red and silver beauty. It was like a key to a whole new world of adventure and possibility. I spent hours in the driveway, hopping and bouncing, trying to find my balance. The satisfying bowing of the spring, the clack of the footpads hitting the pavement, the rush of wind in my face as I soared higher and higher. It was pure magic. I'd pretend I was a kangaroo, leaping through the outback, or a superhero, bounding over tall buildings in a single bound. Of course, mastering the pogo stick wasn't without its challenges. I can't tell you how many times I fell off, skinning my knees and bruising my pride. But I always got back up, determined to conquer this bouncy beast. And when I finally did, when I could hop all the way down the block and back without faltering, it was like I had conquered the world. Let's talk about the toy cigarettes and pipes. Oh man, can you imagine giving a kid a toy like that these days? It seems so wild, so taboo. But back in the 70s, it was just another part of playing grown-up. I remember having this little candy cigarette pack that I'd whip out at recess, pretending to take a drag and blowing out imaginary smoke. I thought I was the coolest thing since sliced bread. And then there was the bubble pipe, this little plastic contraption that you'd fill with a special liquid and blow into, creating cascades of tiny bubbles that looked just like smoke. I felt so sophisticated puffing on that thing, like I was some sort of pint-sized gentleman at a fancy club. Of course, looking back, the whole concept of toy cigarettes and pipes seems pretty messed up. I mean, we were basically being encouraged to mimic a habit that we now know is incredibly harmful. It's crazy to think about how much attitudes have changed in just a few decades. But at the time, it was all just innocent fun. We didn't know any better. We were just kids playing at being adults, trying on different roles and identities like costumes. And in a way, I guess that's what childhood is all about. Experimenting, exploring, and figuring out who we want to be. So there you have it. The strangest collection of toys that somehow made it onto store shelves in the 1970s. From Hugo's 1,000 creepy faces to Skipper's instant puberty, These toys pushed boundaries in ways that would never fly today. The really crazy part? Some of these questionable playthings are now worth serious money. That baby Laugh-A-Lot collecting dust in your grandparents' attic could fetch up to $300 if it still has that nightmare-inducing laugh. An unopened alien figure? Try $1,000 or more. Even the Sunshine family in their original craft store box might help pay for your actual family's groceries.